Hello, and welcome to another Modern Mind Ancient Book where we are going back to move forward. Tonight we're going to go on to week 2, which is technically week 3 of the book of Genesis. We're going to start tonight because it is Shabbat, or Friday night, with a prayer from the beautiful women here tonight. And we're going to light some candles. So here we go.
Blessed are you,
Lord
our
our
God,
God,
King of the universe, who in your goodness formed the heavens by wisdom and stretched out the earth upon its foundations. You established the sun and moon to mark the times, the stars to declare your glory in the night. You set the earth as a home for humankind, a place of wonder. On the seventh day, you completed your work, and you blessed this day and made it holy. You gave it to your people, a gift of peace, a reminder of creation, a sign of the covenant between you and us forever. We remember your goodness in the garden. When you walked with Adam in the cool of the day, you made the world and called it very good. And to this day, your mercy renews all things. Blessed are you, Lord, who brings forth rest from toil, from light from darkness, peace from striving, and gives us this holy time to talk and enjoy everything you have done. Amen.
You have a very good reading voice there. We're going to have to get you to read some books. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity, Father, just to enjoy another Shabbat, Father, that we've reached the end of the week again. And Lord, we just thank you for this week. We thank you for this time. We thank you for our friends and our family and our work and our farms and for our bodies, Lord. I thank you for my little daughter. I pray that you bless her to be like the women of old, like Rachel and Rebecca, that she is counted among those who are known by you. I pray for you two the same, that God is with you and blesses you. And we pray for the listener. We just want to say thank you so much for joining us as we go into week 2, Nick. Yeah. And Chicho. Okay, so we're going to change things up a little bit this week because for the past little bit we have had another person up here with me, but there's not been much conversation. So we just kind of landed on perhaps it may be best if I just, do a presentation versus having somebody who's kind of not conversating with us. Go ahead, Chiquita. Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's get back to what we're doing. So we're going to do it this way for a while, and we'll see how this works. Maybe at some point, if we get enough people here, we can invite Nick up. But the original intent was to have it back and forth, and that wasn't quite happening. So we're gonna try this way. So let's do a quick recap of the last where we ended at, because there was 2 things that were important that I kind of didn't get to, and that's after the flood. When Noah came off the ark, it says that he drank and that his son Ham saw him. And then Ham was cursed, and it was Canaan that was cursed. So we got the Babel thing, we got Babylon, which, puts Babylon in the sights, right? So it's a future-looking thing. But we also had Canaan also put in the sights by Ham. And so, as the story goes, we won't labor it because it's last week, but it appears that to see and to know is to experience. So Ham uncovered the nakedness of his father, meaning his wife. So if you go back to Lamech, he has the 3 sons, Jubal, Tubal, and Tuval, and they're all kind of not good guys. Then he has a daughter, Naamah. And so Naamah's mentioned there, but Noah's wife is not mentioned. And this may be the reason why, because of Ham. So perhaps she went with her son in the biblical way And so, from that came Canaan, and Canaan was cursed for it. So the ways of Ham are Egypt, and the Egyptians would take from close relatives. Later on in the Torah, this is strictly forbidden. However, when Noah came off the boat and God showed the sign of the rainbow, he knew that men's ways are evil. So we're going to see some things in Avram's life which are interesting, to say the least, because sin did not get eradicated in the flood. The people came off the boat and they started acting real similar very quickly afterward. Now, that doesn't mean that God was done, because when we finish chapter 11, which is where we ended, we meet Abraham. So, he was from Ur of the Chaldees. Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. According to Josephus, they took the daughters of Haran, who was killed in Ur. So they took their sisters. Well, it would have been nieces, I'm sorry, right? Because Nahor had Haran, and I forgot Abraham's, what is it? And Avram. Now, when Haran died, he left Lot, who was going to be his heir, but the girls, they didn't have anywhere. So Sarai, she married Avram, and Bethuel married the other daughter. So that, this is something you got to struggle with. If you're going to read the Bible, it's there. This is what happened. And we hear later that Avram actually uses this a number of times when he goes into other areas. So let's just go back to the nations real quick. Japhet, who are the sons of Noah, was Europe and northern Asia. And Ham was Africa and parts of Asia, so, think Egypt and all that kind of thing. And then Shem is Asia and the Near East. So Shem is the line that was blessed, and Abraham is the 10th generation of Shem's line in Mesopotamia. So his early life, he was born in Ur, but he rejected, according to Jewish beliefs, according to the history that we have today, that he rejected idolatry. He rejected multiple gods, and he fled from Ur because of Nimrod, but also he fled from Ur because at the time Elam and Aram were suppressing and oppressing the people. Ur, a short time after Avram fled, fell horrifically. Everything was sacked, everything and everybody was killed. Now, this is also during the time of the rise of the Assyrian Empire. So the Assyrians were the most blessed of people, according to Josephus. And they were the descendants of Shem. There's a form of righteousness there. There is a very shared worldview. It's the order from chaos motif. So the Assyrians, out of the capital of Assur and the big city of Nineveh and etc., their main area there, which is like Iraq and the southern Levant, or southern Mesopotamia, the Mesopotamian Valley, they had a loose organization which later became the very first empire. So this is during that time. And Nimrod was kind of the beginning of that empire. So Avram is the father of the Hebrews. He migrated from Haran, which is northern Mesopotamia. It's in Iraq today. He migrated from Haran eventually to the land of Canaan. Now, Canaan, or Canaan, is the place that was settled by Canaan, who would serve Shem. Right? So when Canaan was cursed during Noah's life, Noah's the one who cursed him, that's what the curse was. The curse was that Canaan would serve Shem. So Abraham's journey is an interesting one because his father grieved his son, right? You have this twice. They left from Ur to Haran because Haran died, and then his father died in Haran. It's the three thing. So he was grieved. He didn't want to leave his land and his people. It wasn't for his father. It was not for his father. But the call was to Abraham. Now, Abraham couldn't leave Ur without being led out by his father. His father was still the head of the household. He still made the decisions, and that's why Avram went to Haran. Now, Josephus says that Avram was a very deep thinker, a very intelligent person. And what he did is he rejected the idolatry. He rejected other gods by observing the sun, the moon, the stars, the seasons. And he said, if these had their own power, then they would act of their own accord. But instead, they do exactly as they're told. Therefore, there is not many gods. There is one God. The God who sets all things in motion. That's the God I serve. Now, this God was not foreign to the Sumerian people. That's where he's from. The nation of Sumer, of Shinar is what it's called here. That is the Hebrew equivalent of Sumerian. It's not foreign to them. They had a Most High God. His name was Anu. But he fell out of favor. He wasn't necessarily worshipped. There were gods of fertility. There were gods of wealth. There were gods of war. And these are the things that people gravitated toward to get the things that they wanted to, because people now are engaging in the seed war. So the selfishness of man causes man to seek that which they desire, and that which they desire is actually not what God is or is like. Because Avram wasn't like his counterparts. He just wasn't. Avram was a man of peace. Avram was a man of intelligence, of thinking, of reasoning, of talking, of preaching, of thinking. He was not a man that took up arms to harm people. What he was a person who sincerely wanted to live out his life to the glory of God. And that's played out throughout this. He believed God, and it was credited as righteousness to him. So our journey starts with this one who is called out in the 10th generation from Shem, and Shem's line was the blessed line. It was the line that carried the priesthood, the religion. So Shem, throughout his time, was good. The early Sumerian culture was great. It was wonderful. Sumerian culture is after the flood. Before the flood, there are no records. We don't know. And we're talking time spans, very long time spans. By the time we get to the book of Genesis, meaning Moses, it's about 2,600 years after creation. So it's not a small time frame. And it's my opinion that the idea of the Nephilim, because we're going to find out that the way the Nephilim act is definitely in this book. And it says that the Nephilim were on the earth both before and after the flood. So if we said that Nimrod was the first Nephilim, he was the first ruler that tried to drive everybody to one place, and he had an evil mind, an evil intention. His intention was to get back at God for destroying his people. He was going to build a tower that could never be affected by a flood, and he would go up and he would grab God by his throat and drag him down to the earth and murder him in front of everybody. It's by my power, says Nimrod. Now, that's not Avram. That is not him. But he was not the majority at the time. If this is the beginning of the Assyrian Empire, these are people of great strength and great war prowess. There's not material goods to be had apart from bargaining and trading or what you have in your immediate region. And the Mesopotamian region definitely valued treasures. But they didn't have lapis lazuli and gold and copper and brass and all these things. It wasn't native to the region. They had to go north to get it, into the mountains. But they didn't just trade. Now, the southern tribes did, and this is what made Shem so great. There were not walled cities. There was just a nation of people who were mostly peaceful. And they didn't have problems. They bartered with everybody because they knew how to grow a large amount of food. They had 2 great rivers, and they learned how to keep and pen and take care of animals. And they learned how to tell the seasons and the times. They knew when to plant. They knew what to do. They created irrigation. They had an excess of food. But by the time Avram is leaving, the mountains had brought down enough salt and enough minerals that the ground was poisoned. And it was getting worse year after year after hundreds of years. It began to not produce what it used to produce. And the people didn't have now the means to go take boatloads of excess food north and then come back with all kinds of treasures. And that's when the material wars started. And that's why Assyria rose to power, because they had to keep order from chaos. So they would go and they would fight, and then they would come back and bring the resources back into the region. And so Avram had to flee that, because as food became scarce, violence became common. That's what happened during that time. So it says here that Avram left Haran, and then he had to go to Egypt. Now, when he went to Egypt, he was afraid. And why was he afraid? Well, because the rulers would take women. And so he had one choice. He made an agreement with Sarai that she would say that he's his sister. And it's true, but she's also his wife. And he did that out of fear that he would be murdered. Now, if she had had children by him, that would be awfully hard to do that. It's as if God's providence was kind of working through these things, because it's not just Pharaoh, it's also Avimelech, the king of the father king, right, of another region. So he tells this lie, but it's not a lie, because he's telling the truth. She is his blood relative. The problem is that these Nephilim are still at the heads of these nations. This is the definition of what a Nephilim is. They went out and they saw that the daughters were good, and they would take them. It's violence through sexual it's forcing people to be yours. It's taking what's not yours. It's by the will of the one. And it fits the Sumerian worldview, because the Sumerian leaders of city-states were called Lugals, big men. Not strong men, not large men, people with authority. So it's my opinion, and I believe we're going to see this sooner than later, and I would love to spearhead these studies. I want to define Abraham. I want to go back to school for this, and this is what I want to do. I think if we define Abraham and his culture, then we define the Nephilim. Because I don't think that the Nephilim in this context are anything more than the big men. That's what they are. They are the Lugals. They are the leaders of the city-states who eventually banded together to become the Assyrians, who had a 1,000-year reign, and they were absolutely brutal. They took what they wanted. They took it against the will of the people. This is not God's design. He didn't design us to murder and kill and commit sexual immorality whenever we want to. That's not what we are supposed to be. We are supposed to be a people who are peaceful, who do the things that Jesus did. If the rabbi teaches us what God's image truly is, then his image is like Abraham, who did no war, who bargained, who taught, who led, who reasoned, who brought people to faith by being a good man, a difficult man with a difficult life. Because the seed war still exists. You have Abraham, who is childless and who runs into two Nephilim. That's how I would design that. I would say that the Pharaoh is a Nephilim, and I would say that Avimelech is a Nephilim. I would say that the leaders of the city-states are these people. Now, are there giants? Yes, there are giants. There are people who are 7 and 8 foot tall, but that doesn't mean that they are the Nephilim. I think Nephilim are very easily defined as Lugals, leader of city-states. So, Avram does not have children. He's desperate for children. The one time that Abraham goes to war, he takes his allies, he had allies in the region, and he takes the people from his household who are trained in war. It's not like he didn't know war. It's not like they didn't have weapons, but that wasn't his modus operandi. That's not the way he lived his life. He was not a violent person. Instead, it was about self-defense. So when 4 kings from Shinar, from Sumer, the Assyrians, when they came through to rape, pillage, and murder and take resources, and the 5 kings, Sodom, and these people, the Sodomites, they couldn't conquer them. Instead, they got conquered. Avram prayed, and he had to go save Lot. That's his relatives. Lot is of his family. He's of his brother Haran. Without Lot, that name no longer lives. Haran has to continue on. That's why Avram took Lot with him, but did not make him his heir. Lot could not be the heir of Avram, because he was the heir of Haran. So he had to go save Lot. So he went, and he was a very skilled warrior, and he had a very skilled house. And they went, and they won. And when they came back, they brought back the resources. But Lot went back to Sodom, and Avram, he did not seek glory. He didn't want materials and riches. He already had enough of it. God supplied through Sarai. As she was taken into these households, into Pharaoh's household, into Abimelech's household, he was given many gifts. And then God stopped anything from happening to her, and she was returned to them. And then they were told, Sarai and Avram, don't lie to us anymore, because we don't want her. They were still moral people, right? They're not, these people aren't like the monsters. It's the Assyrians. But Avram was not to have this land yet either, because the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet complete. Where Avram went, there was still a form of godliness. There was something there that God still protected, that he was still collecting from those people into probably Avram's household. But when Avram came back from war, he met 2 kings. He met the king of Sodom, whom he said, I want nothing from you. I will take nothing from you, because I won't be associated with you. You will not say you gave me anything, but give it to my allies. My allies can have their part, but I want nothing from you. And he met Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, from the city of Salem. Now, we as a Bible scholar community, we act like we can't know this, that Melchizedek is just an answer in nowhere. But I think if you define Avram as a Sumerian from the land of Shinar, then we know that the leaders of city-states, we could call them Nephilim if they're evil, but we could call them the kings of righteousness too. And they were righteous people who worshiped the one true God, the God Most High. And that's what he calls Avram. He says, you, follower of the God Most High, whose name at that time was Anu. He says, you, Avram, follower of the God Most High, and he blessed him there. And you know what Avram became? He became a priest in the line of Shem. Melchizedek was a priest in the line of Shem. The people from Sumer were fleeing in all directions. Now, Sumer, the Assyrians, had conquered from sea to sea. And if you know the geography, you know that the sea is the Persian Gulf, right? And then the other sea is the Mediterranean. They had conquered all of this land. And this king fled the evil which was taking place by the Elamites and the Aramites, Elam and Aram. They were attacking and destroying everything. Assyria was forming into a powerful nation of violent people because there wasn't resources. That's why Avram left. So Melchizedek left too. And he set up a place in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, the very place that is now Jerusalem. And when he came out, he blessed Avram to become a lugal. He became a leader of people, a nation all his own. That's why Avram was so excited about it. That's why he tithed to this man. This was a biblical moment. This was a fulfillment of what God was doing and promising to Avram. When Melchizedek came out, that was a fulfillment. It was Avram becoming a priest of a city-state, of a nation, becoming a leader. He got blessed of that. Now, there's a couple covenantal things that happened here. So Avram and Lot had to kind of split ways, right? Like it was getting too big, and that was bad for Lot because the blessing was with Avram. Now they split their ways, and there was the war, but God kept making a covenant with Avram. So when God appeared to him, this is what was told to him. I don't have a son, Avram said. Eleazar, he's from Damascus. He's the guy who's going to take on my house. And God said, no, it's not the way it's going to be. Now, God believed him, but they engineered their own ways. So he took Hagar, which is an Egyptian, right? That means Hagar is from another place, the immigrant. They oppressed the immigrant from Egypt. And he had a son, Ishmael, right? The problem is Ishmael was never going to be the one. But because he was tied to Avram's household, he was blessed. And he would become 12 different groups of people, just like Israel. Now, these are the people that we know today. We know them. That's why God is still working something out. Israel has to eventually be confronted with and fight the descendants of Ishmael. All of this still has to happen. These are the Arabs. But they were never going to be the line. But they were going to be blessed. They were going to be called by God. There is some quality there that has to take place. It's the seed war. Ishmael and Isaac, the seed war. And the women, right? Because Hagar gets mistreated by Sarai. Horribly. She, in the end, so Hagar flees once and comes back. She has Ishmael. Avram loves Ishmael. He's a strong man. He's a hunter. He's the kind of guy we like. But he's not the child of promise. He's not the one who's going to carry the line. And we saw how the line works. It goes from Shem all the way to Avram. Avram gets anointed by the high priest, right? Melchizedek of righteousness. He becomes now this totally sanctioned line. And he's on his way. And he's hoping in Ishmael because they engineered it to be this way. But that wasn't the way it was going to be. It was always going to be Isaac. But we just don't have eyes to see. We don't have the patience to be that waits. But that doesn't make Avram not righteous. Instead, it just shows how good God is to people who are broken. I mean, Avram didn't always do the right things. But when God made a covenant, they cut animals in half, and the two birds they put on either side. You don't destroy that which is in heaven. Birds are never, ever cut because they are a different animal. They are in the heavens. If they are sacrifices, their blood gets poured, but they never get cut or hurt. That's why Jesus was never cut or broken, because he's from the heavens. The fish are the same way. Those are servants of God for sure. The birds are the servants of God in the air. They come back at the end and they eat the dead bodies. They're servants. But when that covenant was made, it wasn't Abraham that walked through the covenant. It was instead God. It was the light in the darkness that walked through and made the promise that he would be destroyed if he ever turned against Abraham. Abraham has land, seed, and dominion. Those are his promises. He will possess the land of Israel. He will have descendants greater than the stars in the sky in number. And he will rule the earth. There will be a king that comes from Abraham that rules this earth. That's the promise. And he is the head crusher, the seed war. Now, Ishmael and Isaac are playing out the seed war. That's what's happening. And it gets passed on to Isaac. Because Isaac has Esau and Jacob. And both of those have the seed war. And in both cases, the mothers play a negative part in what happens to the kids. Because Hagar is badly treated by Sarai. Sarai does not want to deal with her saying, my son will rule this house, and you don't have kids. Therefore, I am the woman of the house. The pride of life. Because women in this culture only get to rule the house. That's what they get. They don't get to rule anything else. When it came, and this is also that curse playing out. When Pharaoh said, bring me that woman, she didn't have a choice. She was going. And there was nothing that Avram was going to say about it because Pharaoh requested her. She is going. She would not rule over men. All of the curse is playing out in these stories because men have strength of violence. The strength of violence was ruling the world. And it plays out, the seed war plays out in these kids. So, Avram has Isaac. Now, this is important. Circumcision enters the world, okay? So, circumcision was a sign of the covenant. It's a sign of faith. It is modifying that which men esteemed as their strength. So, this is a biblical worldview because you are to leave, cleave, have descendants, subdue, right? These people believed in the Bible. They just carried it out into the form of violence, where the thing that men take pride in, our strength, that which that creates more of me. Avram was asked to modify this to be different from other men. And so he did. That's how circumcision enters. The Muslims do circumcise. The Arabs circumcise, but they circumcise at 13 years old. The Jewish people, because of Isaac, circumcise on the 8th day. There's a shared covenant. Remember at the beginning of this, I said that the Bible does not tell us truth. It tells us, in whose line are you? That's the question. Which side of the seed war are you? It's a competing worldview. And the two competing worldviews are ever present in this. There is descriptive and prescriptive. God never said take more than one wife. Avram has 4 wives. Is he sinning? Yes. Yes, he is. But that's why there's sacrifices. Did he always do the right thing? No. So, is it about proper religious expression, i.e. keeping the law, the Torah, because there's lots of law in here now. We've briefly brushed on it, but there's lots of covenants in here. There's lots of law in here. You have the covenant of life and creation, that you were created for the dry land. God gave us that and made an agreement with us. Then we have the covenant of death, which entered the world when we decided to be prideful, even though he prophesied to us not to eat from the tree. But we did it anyway. We have the covenant of death. Then we have death entering the people of God when Cain murdered Abel. That covenant just got worse and worse. Then the covenant of Noah. Never again will I destroy the earth by water. Then the covenant of Avram, land, seed, dominion, circumcision, right? So we've got all these agreements taking place. And they're not being kept really. But God is still faithful. That's why God made the agreement to create land people. That's why God made the agreement to set Adam and Eve outside of the garden and clothe them in skin and teach them about sacrifice. That's why God made the agreement in the Noahic covenant, even though he knows we're evil. And that's why God made the agreement in the Abrahamic covenant that he would be the one who's ripped apart, not Abraham. None of this has anything to do with people. Regardless of how destructive and nasty we are, God has a remnant. And he's always reaching out for us. And he's always calling for us to reach out to him. And it's relatively few. Wide is the road that leads to death, and narrow the one that leads to life. This is present right here in Genesis. The gospel is with Abraham. There's nothing short of God's grace and mercy present in the entire Testament that is the Bible. There's no new and old. There's only God's word and God's working in the world. And that's what we're learning right now. A curious thing takes place. After Sodom is wiped out and Lot is taken advantage of by his daughters who were from Sodom, they approached their father and made children. They had Edom and they had another one. Both of them are derived from their father. And both of these people become enemies to Israel. Lot is never talked about again after this. And by the way, Sodom did get wiped out by fire. The valley, which is now the Salt Sea in Israel, was the valley where Lot lived. And it was a thriving community with real beautiful land, and something happened that made glass from rock. And it's a proven fact. Today, we know that this happened. Now, skeptics will say, well, we just explained that story in this way. But I don't say that. I say God is real, and he's active, and he's moving. And when he pours out fire from heaven, fire comes from heaven. So after Lot's failure, right, he chose the wrong place to be. And his daughters learned that, which is important for us Christians. If we put ourselves in evil places, our children will follow that. So don't put yourself in evil places if you care about your kids. Lesson learned, if we take that, then we can create progeny that love God. If we put them into bad things, they are going to do and be bad. That's just the way it is. We have to teach them ourselves. That's what Shabbat is about. That's what tonight is about. When we sit at our tables and have meals and remember God and light candles, we're supposed to do it with our children. We're supposed to teach and lead the people that we love to save them from Lot's experience. Abraham has a son, and his name is Isaac. And Sarah turns on Hagar. And then a curious thing happens. The Sumerians offered human sacrifice. That's a fact. In the cities, there are places that have human offerings. The city states and the people around this time and in this region offered human sacrifices. It says here that Avram was asked for Isaac to kill him. It's called the Akedah, A-K-E-D-A, the Akedah. And for Jewish people, this is a curious thing, right? They said, well, God didn't. There's 4 different explanations on the one hand and on the other hand. God asked him to do it, but he didn't mean it. God did mean it, but he didn't mean to kill him because he didn't go there with the intention of killing him because he knew that God would supply the sacrifice. Avram knew this beforehand. Other ones say, well, fate changed it because God intervened. There's 4 different ways of viewing this, but I don't see it this way at all. If we go back to Job, we know that there are spiritual powers, that there is something spiritual happening because the sons of God were presenting themselves before God. Now, if it's pre-flood, maybe the adversary is Cain, who is no longer mentioned by name, but only called the adversary. So maybe he's just a man that walked up and God says, oh, there you are. Because he says, from where'd you come? And he says, wandering about the earth. When Cain is cursed, he wanders about the earth. That's what it said. It's too much for me. I will be a wanderer. So yes, maybe. Maybe it was the man Cain. But maybe it was this Nahash, this serpent, if it's post-flood, that was killed in the flood, that is now trapped on earth, waiting in Sheol for the day of judgment, and now these spiritual principalities and powers are present and influencing the world around us. Jesus teaches that too. So the question is, what is it? I don't know. But this much I do know. Abraham heard that he was going to offer Isaac to God Most High. Somehow now God wants human sacrifices? This is an odd occurrence. So the question is what is it? For me, I think that it's the same thing that we saw in Job. So if you read the book of Jasher, Jasher, it says in that book that Satan, the adversary, approached God and said, what about Abraham? And they had a conversation. And that conversation landed on, well, you gave him a son. And God responds in the same way. Then go tempt him, but you can't have his son. And then you have the Akedah. So Abraham takes Isaac, who probably at this point is about 16 or 20 or something. He's not a small man. And a man at that time was a man. He could have fought his father if he wanted to. But what we're getting a glimpse into here in this book is an ancient world. We're seeing how men viewed women. We're seeing how women viewed other women and served their men. How children were seen and raised. And if you have eyes to see, if you have history enough to see, you see that this is a legit story from the ancient times. There is nothing questionable in this. This is the way people lived their lives. And a young man would be beholden to his father. So he took him to Mount Moriah. Does that sound familiar? Melchizedek's city, the city of righteousness, to sacrifice him to the one true God. And he put him on the altar, and he raised the knife. And just before he plunged it into presumably his neck to drain his blood, it was told, don't do this. And he didn't. And the two of them embraced one another, and behold, a ram was caught in a thicket. And then God knew that Abraham would hold nothing back. And what did Jesus tell us? If you love this life, you will not see the kingdom to come. This is the gospel. Now, is it ugly? Yes, it's ugly. But it's a representation of the culture at the time. Abraham was a real man. And people were offering the most precious things to them to have a future. We still do it today. We abort our children for the same reasons. But God is not a God who wants human sacrifices. And this is proof of it. Not only is it future-looking, messianic. Isaac was put to death, but then he rose alive, right? Jesus, it's the same thing, but it's more than that. Because as Israel became a nation, Israel would come from Jacob. As Israel became a nation, they were supposed to look back at this moment and say, never will we offer our children to death. It is not required. It is not required from us. And it should have never been a part of any of their culture, because it was taught to us by Abraham, the father of faith, that we do not destroy our children. for nothing. They are our heritage, and they are our future. And we do not destroy our children. God does not require it. Sarai died, and she was buried in the cave of Machpelah. This is the first piece of property that they legitimately own. He purchased it for 400 pieces of silver, and it became the land of Avram, the land of Israel. This is their first piece of land. Now, Isaac needed a wife. Avram did not want this to happen in a way that would be from these people, not from the land of Canaan. So he sent a servant back to Mesopotamia, to Haran. And when he got there, there's a curious thing that happens. There's a well, and there's all kinds of shepherds around that are men, but they can't move the stone out of the way. They're waiting for Rachel, who's a shepherdess, to come and move the stone out of the way. So, were they bigger people? I don't. That's a weird part for me in this book, just a side note. But Jacob does move the rock out of the mouth of the well, presumably by himself. So that's a weird thing. Not Jacob, the servant, Eleazar. So, okay. So now he finds Rachel, right? No, Rebecca. He finds her, brings her back, they get married, and then we get into the seed war again, which we talked about a little bit already. Abraham dies. You know, Ishmael has his descendants. They separate. He marries from the land. He's completely disobedient. He is not in the covenant. He is the seed war. The seed of Satan, that's him. But Isaac, not so much. He obeys. He marries into his own family, which is another one of those things where it's hard for us. But this is the ancient way. The rulers of the day didn't intermingle with other people. There were classes and castes and systems. And so when he goes back and he takes a relative from his own family, it's not a fake story. That's what makes this a true historical account. Because it's real. This is what happens. The bloodlines matter, and whose name are you? Right? This is a very prominent part of these books. Now Isaac has sons. And he has a lot of sons. And again, the seed war is totally present because his two sons, not a lot of sons, I'm sorry, that's Jacob. His two sons, they play out the same thing. The wives are jealous of one another. All this happens again. Now, Isaac's life is kind of, it's not as eventful as Abraham's life. It's actually kind of like short-lived. There's like this little part about his life. But when we get to Jacob, Jacob's kind of the star of the show here. You want to go to the next couple slides for us? Okay, so Avram is the father. Avram Avinu, right? So Abraham the father. The covenant of parts, which is called the Brit Ben Chabertaim, which just means the covenant of parts. This is a very important part of Jewish understanding, and it's what inaugurates the covenant. So it's the covenant of parts. Hospitality and justice are a big thing for Avram. And that's something that we could read this and we could go, you know what? This is a defining characteristic of a good person, of somebody that God is pleased with. To invite people in, to eat with people, to be kind, to not seek violence around us, but instead to make friends and have good relationships with the people around us. That is what defines Abraham. And then the Akedah. This is something you should never forget. It's something that needs a lot of study. It's not for the faint of heart. None of these stories are the faint of heart because it's all about seed war and keeping the covenant of go forth, multiply, right, and have dominion. These people were very purposeful in their lives. They had drive and reason. But what you're reading is the story of the rulers of this time. Avram was not a common man. Avram was a ruler working within the confines of kingship, working within the confines of the rulers in the areas. This was not a simple person. Avram was a big man. Christian teachings. He's our father, right? It's Romans 4. Jewish and Christian teachings are not different. We have to respect and value where we came from. Romans 4 is Genesis. It's the covenant fulfilled in Christ. This is the image of what's to come. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the flesh. They are the people who were called out, but they were called out to bring about the one who would come from Israel under the law to satisfy and fulfill the seed war. Jesus. This is all about Yeshua HaMashiach, the Christ who is coming, the one who is anointed, who comes from God. Jesus said, Avram rejoiced to see my day. Avram knew a God-man. A God-man appeared at his tent and told him about Sodom, that it would be destroyed. And he told him that he would have a child in a year's time and that he would name him Yitzhak, which means laughter, Isaac, because everybody laughed. First Sarah laughed, and then later Abraham laughed. But God said, don't laugh. You're going to have a son. This time when I see you next year, you're going to have a son. I don't care if she's 90 and you're 100. You are having a son with her. That's what's happening. And it did happen. And it caused all kinds of problems because they made their own way prior to God making the way, which is what we do. That's called grace. And that's called Jesus. And it's in the Old Testament. It's everywhere. Where God is, he is the same. And then you have the Akedah foreshadowing the crucifixion. Like I said earlier, Isaac was placed and he was as good as dead. Avram was going to plunge the knife into his neck. It was going to happen. But God said, I will provide the sacrifice. Jesus. These are the key events of this section. The call of Abraham, the covenant of parts, Ishmael's birth and his circumcision, Sodom and Gomorrah, which were overturned by fire and brimstone, which did happen. It's a fact. The birth of Isaac, which happened after calamity, right? So you can see how these cycles happen. So how should we expect our lives to happen? We should expect them to be calamitous. We should expect to have problems in this world just like our father Abraham. Because if he's the one who led the way by being faithful and trusting God, even though he didn't all the time, then this is what our life will be like. Then you have the Akedah. Everything was asked from him, and he was willing to give it. And everything was asked of Jesus, and he did give it. From Abraham, it was not required. From Jesus, it had to be. And he cried tears of blood, asking that it wouldn't be so. But then when it came time for the knife to be plunged, it was plunged. And that's the God we know. The one who didn't require it from me. I'm not even capable of doing this. I would never give her, and I'm sorry, Lord, but it's true. But he would give for me. And that's why I love him. He's bigger and stronger and better. And I'm so thankful for Friday nights because he gave us life. Then Sarah passed and they got their first piece of land. Now they actually own a piece of land. And then Isaac is married, and that's the end of this one. Now, it does give you the generations in this, but those generations are created, the stories are told after this section. That's for next week. So here's what's real. Jewish history is universal history. I am a Gaul. I am a Galatian. My descendant is Japhet. When Noah came off the boat, he had sons. My great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is Japhet. I am from Noah. I'm not the line of Shem. The line of Shem brought Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob was designed to bring Jesus, who would bless the world and bring everybody right back in to be the sons of promise. Anybody who would come. Avram is a philosopher. He's a monotheist in a time that was not monotheist. What was lost, he brought back, he returned. The same way that Jesus brought back the purified Judaism of Jesus is the real religious expression that was given by God to Moses. It's not about rules and things. Just like Avram couldn't actually pull it off, neither can we. But by God's grace, we can still seek his ways and do things and pray to know and live for him more. And we will be saved by what God has done, not what I do. We should be men of peace because God is not at war with us. The world around us might be, but it doesn't matter who they are because they're going to die. What we should do is tell them, stop because you're going to die. There is a God who's real and he cares about you. And if you keep doing this, you're going to die. You've only got today. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. And now you have covenants. And these covenants are worth remembering. Adamic, the fall. Noahic, the flood. Abrahamic, circumcision, land, seed, and then the dominion thing. And those are the covenants that exist at this point. Without Genesis, you can't understand the rest of the Bible. If you get Genesis down, everything else comes into play. If the men of old are just the ultra-aggressive murderers and not some like spiritual, gigantic, six-fingered giant things, but instead we misunderstood that, then we have Nephilim on earth today, don't we? Vladimir Putin is a Nephilim. Kim Jong-il is a Nephilim. The leaders of Iran, whatever they're called, the Shah, and all, those are Nephilim. They're people who don't live for God. The seed war makes more sense if it's evil people ruling on high, calling themselves sons of God. And what did the Pharaoh call himself? A god. That's the very definition of a Nephilim in this book. It doesn't make any sense to have some other thing. Now, there are spiritual principalities and powers. We know that. But in my opinion, based on the contents of this book, I would say that those powers are those who are dead and know they will never find life in the kingdom to come because they've awakened from this body and now they hate you. And they hate this place. And they hate God because they know they will never see the world to come. They are trapped here waiting for judgment and they speak evil all over the place. It's not demons from other places. Daimon are just spirits. They are the spirits of the dead on the earth that no judgment is coming. When Jesus cast out spirits, he called them unclean spirits. He didn't call them angels from another place. He called them unclean spirits. They will not see the kingdom to come. Those held in judgment. This is an ancient worldview. It's not new. The problem is Christians don't accept it. We don't live that way. What happens when you cast them out in God's name? They leave. Why do they leave? Because they can't be in the presence of God. Because they will never be in the presence of God. That's why they hate him. And they hate you. That's it for tonight. Do you guys have any questions? No? All right, we want to thank you. Please reach out at modernmindancientbook@gmail.com. We appreciate you so much. We want to leave you with this prayer. May the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you and turn his countenance towards you and bring you peace. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Thank you for coming tonight. and we hope that you enjoy this teaching. Please feel to reach out whenever you'd like to and enjoy the rest of the content. We have every survey that you can possibly imagine of the older documents all the way up to the new ones, and various teachings in between. Please feel free to look at the rest of the content. Goodbye.